All right. Hello, I think we're live. It's a little bit hard to tell. Okay, I'm live now. Good afternoon, everyone. And it is 1:38, 8 minutes past the time that I had intended to start this live stream session on calming fear with an acupressure, brain-based, body-based technique called EFT. So just trying to figure out some of the new features with Facebook and doing live. I was trying to do it from my business page. Didn't quite work out. So we're going to plan B. That took a little while as well. But let's put all of that behind us right now. If you are watching live, welcome. And if you are watching later to the recording, then welcome to the video. I've been posting some things on the last few days to share resources, insight, guidance, coaching, support around what's happening out in the world. And a lot of people are being impacted by the virus in numerous ways. Some people are on the front line and having to deal with it, in real time. Every day are medical people and the people who are behind the scenes trying to figure out how to manage the workplace and their businesses, how to manage the spread of the disease, and what needs to be done to try to curb the tide and move through this and clear the virus out of our communities as quickly as possible. So what I wanted to do today is just, get down to some specific tactics about how you can begin to calm the part of your brain, which is being highly activated through the state of uncertainty, which creates fear. The way that the brain goes into often worst case scenarios and catastrophizing. Fear, I've said this in some prior videos, fear is not a bad thing. It can be a good thing, but it's only meant to be a temporary signal to trigger our awareness to something that we might need to take care of because it could be a threat or something that we need to prepare for to minimize or avoid a threat. But once the signal has been triggered, then we no longer need the emotion, and then it's time to go into utilizing our executive functions, which is the ability for reason, logic, problem solving, planning, strategizing, implementation, etc. But sometimes we get stuck in the fear, and it's hard to move into that next phase. That's what's going to make the difference to help to protect us or to help to move us through the situation as safely or as effectively as possible. And so what's essentially happening is we're getting stuck in the fight or flight system. And so it could be fight, flight, it could also be freeze, and it could also be faint. So there's the 4 F's that can occur when this area of the brain senses any kind of perceived or possible threat, and it gets activated, and it causes us to go into autopilot. And when there's a real imminent threat, danger to us right now physically, that we do need to fight off, run away from, or even freeze, make ourselves immobile so that we're not seen and the predator will hopefully go away. The other thing that can happen is the system is overloaded and we can faint. So it just shuts down the brain even more fully, and we just lose consciousness. So those are the 4 things that can happen. And we're not able to move into executive functioning at that point when we're operating fully from the fight or flight center, which is activated by a little almond-shaped sized element in the back of our brain, near our brain stem. Then we go into autopilot. What's the knee-jerk reaction? What's the immediate response that seems appropriate to move us away from the threat or to help to fight it off. And this area of the brain that is responsible for the executive functions that I mentioned actually diminishes. It calms down, it lowers its activity so that this area of the brain can take over to just immediately do what seems the most necessary in that moment, to fight, run, freeze, and to get us out of danger. Again, sometimes that's necessary when we're in a situation where we can fight off something physically, where we can run away or remove ourselves from the threatening environment or predator. So what we need to do with what's happening right now is to recognize we have the fear and then begin to move away from that signal and into activating the executive functions of the brain, which are right here in the behind the forehead, the area of the brain that's called the prefrontal cortex. And this is the area of the brain that's responsible, like I said, for reason, logic, problem solving, creativity, decision making, skill building, etc. And this is what we really need to be working with more in the situation that we're truly in. Once you've done the preparation work, you've done what you needed to do, then it's a matter of, okay, what logically is my next thing to do, and what do I have the ability to have some control over? And I covered that a little bit more in a prior video. So we can control what we choose to focus on and give our energy to, what meaning we're giving to the events, and what actions we choose to take. So what I want to do today is teach you a couple of techniques that involve a process called EFT, which stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. And it can very quickly, very effectively begin to calm the activity in the hindbrain, the primitive brain, where that fight or flight system gets activated, and it starts to activate, physically activate, and redirect the energy to the prefrontal cortex area of the brain, where we can then begin to engage those executive functions. And this is the area of our brain that, as humans, is more fully developed and that allows us to do all of the amazing things that we can do as humans. And right now, you need to be in a better decision-making mode. If you're making decisions from back here, you're limiting yourself, and you're usually not making the very best decisions, or not ones that are really relevant to the type of perceived threat that we have going on. I'm not going to explain a lot about EFT. If you want to learn more about it, I'll put some links below after the video is ended so that you can click on those. You can learn a little bit more about EFT. But just like you don't need to really understand all the workings and mechanisms of your cell phone, you just need to know how to make the call, the simple steps to make the call, to push the buttons, to dial who you want to, or if you're using it as a camera, or the different ways you can use your phone nowadays. All you need to know is the simple steps to get it to do what you need it to do. You don't have to understand the whole mechanisms behind how the cell phone works and how the signal gets in, it goes out, and all of that. So I'm just going to teach you the steps, the simple steps that you need to do. And there's a variety of ways to utilize EFT. I'm just going to cover 2, maybe 3 specific ways to use it. The first thing to think about with EFT is that there are specific trigger points, acupressure points, meridian points, touch points, whatever you want to call them, certain points on the body that help to trigger the shift in the brain from the activation of the amygdala to the activation of the prefrontal cortex area. And through the stimulation of these points, it helps to influence the activities of the brain. I take a sip of water. All right, so there's a lot of science, a lot of research behind this. It can seem a little bit odd, but it is highly effective in a lot of different ways for a lot of different things. I'll cover in some future videos some more advanced ways to use it. But let's use it right now to just calm any sense of fear, because if not, then it turns into anxiety. We really deepen it in our bodies, and we start to get into this endless loop rumination cycle in our brains and catastrophizing and blowing things out of proportion. So the trigger points are here on the side of the hand, what we call the karate chop point. So if you're giving someone a karate chop, this is where the hand hits. Karate chop point. And then we've got the top of the head right here, right in the very center of the top. And then you've got eyebrow point, which is between the bridge of the nose and the beginning of the eyebrow. Some of the points are in the middle of the body, unilateral, and some of the points you have a right point and a left point, bilateral. So the case here for the eyebrow point, we've got the spot here between the bridge of the nose and the beginning of the right eyebrow, and the bridge of the nose and the beginning of the left eyebrow. Now, you could just tap one side for any place where we have a bilateral point, but I find that I have more effectiveness, and usually this is the case for my clients as well. We have more effectiveness if we are tapping both sides at the same time. So you would tap them both at the same time, just using a couple of fingers to do that. And then the side of the eye point is out here, just outside the corner of the eye. And then underneath here, now we abbreviate EFT as tapping because usually we're tapping the points, but we can stimulate them through tapping, rubbing, applying a pulsing pressure, or in the case of acupuncture, sticking a needle in it. I'm not going to have you do that. Just rubbing, tapping, or doing a pulsing pressure. And you can vary that from point to point as well, depending on the point and what feels better for it. After the side of the eye, then we have the under the eye. And I'll explain about how long to tap or how many times to tap at each point in a moment. But this is the under eye point. This is the under the nose point, so that's a unilateral point right here above the lip, below the nose, in this little groove. Then we've got the chin point, also referred to as under lip point. It's right here under the lip. It's referred to as chin point, but it's not on the chin. It's a little bit divot above the chin, below the lip. Okay? And then you've got the collarbone point, which is found if you glide your fingers down your collarbone, right before you get to the hollow of your neck on either side. You've got these protruding bones. For some people, you can't feel it as much if you got a little bit more skin there. And you're going to go just actually below them. Not going to be on those bones. You're going to be just a little bit below them. Collarbone points are about square with the sides of your chin. Okay. And then your underarm point is going to be right here down about 4 inches below your armpit. It's a little bit below the nipple point. And so for women, if you're feeling where your bra strap is, that's where you're going to want to be hitting. And I usually use all of my fingers, the surface of my fingers, to tap that point. If you're doing the bilateral point, there's 2 ways to reach both of those points. You can either do what we call the hug, reaching across, so like you're hugging yourself, and then tapping those points like this. Or you can do what we call the monkey, going up like this to that point. And kids tend to love this. Yes, we teach EFT to kids, and they're actually better at it usually than adults, because the adults try to, poo-poo it or say this is weird and I'm not going to do it. So monkey like this, or hug like this. Next point is the wrist point, where your wrist bends forward. And if you're doing bilateral tapping, you can tap them together like this. Some of my clients switch the wrists and do it like this. And then ending back at the top of the head. I end at the top of the head. Some people just end here. Some people don't use the wrist point. Some practitioners add the liver point, which is under the breast, the rib cage, but I tend to skip that one because I work mostly with women, and that's harder to get to. So there are points: karate chop, top of the head, inside of the eye, outside of the eye. Oh, this is also referred to as eyebrow. So inside eye or eyebrow, side of the eye, under the nose, under the lip, collarbone, under the arms, wrists, and back to the top of the head. So those are the points. Now, ideally what you want to do before you begin the stimulation of the points is to have a set point where you're starting, so that after you do one full round of the tapping points, then you can check back in with yourself to gauge the sensation, if it's physical or the emotion and the feeling of it, the intensity level of it. So first try to pinpoint what you're feeling. And today we're tapping on fear, but it can be any other kind of disruptive emotion, feeling. It could be confusion, frustration, uncertainty, overwhelm, procrastination, whatever it might be. So today we're going to be talking about fear, and gauge it on a 0 to 10 scale. 10 being as extreme as you can imagine it being, 0 being it's gone. So scale of 0 to 10, how strong is the feeling right now? You can also sort of tune into your body and notice where and how you might be feeling it physically. Usually we're also feeling our emotions physically, a tightness in the throat or the chest, for example, or a weight on our chest. When we're working with tapping, you can also focus on pain. But how is it showing up in your body? How's it representing itself in your body, as well as just a sort of a feeling of emotion? So that also, if you're noticing how you're feeling it in your body when you start, and if you do a round of the tapping, you can also tune back into your body and see any kinds of shifts with that, a lessening, a lightening, a shrinking, any way that you're moving, it moved from one place to another place, any way that you're noticing that physical sensation is changing is also something that's good and is showing you that we're having an impact, because our thoughts also affect our body. We can't separate the mind from the body. So this is why tapping is also known as a somatic emotional release process, because we're working with the body as well as the brain. What am I feeling right now? So maybe fear. And try to qualify it as well. What specifically are you afraid of? The more specific you can be about what's driving the emotion, or what the emotion is centered around, or what triggered the emotion, usually the better results you're going to get with the tapping, especially if you've got fear about numerous things. Focus on one at a time. Sometimes doing the bundling is effective, but oftentimes you need to focus on one specific thing at a time, one specific fear at a time. I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of this. Just maybe write all those things down, and then give each one a rating of 0 to 10 of how strong they feel to you, and then start with the one that is the highest, because that can generally positively impact the lower ones. And so once you know what the feeling is, what it's centered around, what's triggering it, what specific fear you want to focus on in this moment, then give it a rating 0 to 10. Then you can begin the tapping. All right. So we want to have a starting place. We want to know what we're trying to impact with the tapping, and then after you do a round, you check in with that to see if there's any kind of movement with that, any kind of shift in the intensity level. Like give it a rating after the second round, 0 to 10, how strong it feels. All right, so this is the first way that you can begin the tapping. Very simple. It's what we call the tap and breathe. And so it helps you to just tune into your breath, which naturally, as you tune into your breath and as you slow your breath down, it helps to have a calming effect on the brain and the nervous system, what we call it helps to deactivate the sympathetic nervous system, and which is the stress response, and then it helps to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calming effect within the body. So what am I feeling? What's the intensity level of it right now? You start to focus on your breath and doing the breathe and tap. And it's also a distraction technique. So as you're focusing on where you're tapping, you're focusing on your breath, it's helping you to move your thoughts away from what you were just thinking about that was initiating that fear cycle for you. So I'm just going to demonstrate. Deep breath in, preferably through your nose, and breath out. Try to get a deep breath in down into your belly, not so much here in your chest. Deep breath in. And slowly let it out. And then one more. So you're going to do 2 to 3 slow, deep breaths in at the karate chop and out. Then you go to the next point and same thing, 2 to 3 deep breaths in and out. I like to pause and hold my breath for a moment before releasing. And when we're really panicked and afraid, anxious, oftentimes we're breathing shallowly. We're not breathing very deeply. We're kind of holding our breath. So this helps to slow our breath down, to deepen the breath, to be purposeful with the breath. And I'm just continuing to tap at the point before I move on to the next. So then there's the eyebrow point. Again, you can do one side or both. I do recommend both. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. And try to stay focused while you're doing this, not letting your mind wander all over the place. Just focus on your breath. And if you're focusing on anything, just focus on that one thought of that one fear. What you're afraid of. And then 2 to 3 deep breaths here under the eyes. You can do this with your eyes closed as well, if there's too much stimulus around, or it helps you to just kind of focus a little bit more deep in that breath. Obviously, you don't want to do this if you're driving. There's ways you can tap while you're driving, using one hand. When you're familiar with the technique enough where you can just kind of do it without having to think so much consciously about it, hold the steering wheel with one hand while you just tap and breathe, especially if traffic tends to stress you out. Collarbone, 2 to 3 deep breaths here. I'm going to abbreviate for a moment and move on to the next point so I can make sure that I demonstrate the second way to tap, where we incorporate the wording in. Again, hug or monkey. You can rub like this, or you can tap like this with your fingertips or the backs of your fingers, any way that you want to stimulate that area, with 2 to 3 deep breaths, and then move to the wrists, 2 to 3 deep breaths. And you should probably notice already, even before you finish, that you're starting to feel calmer, you're starting to feel more centered, you're starting to feel less activated. Your thoughts might be starting to settle down. And then ending at the top of the head. One final deep breath in and out. And then move back to the feeling again, the feeling of fear. The fear about whatever that first fear was that you were focusing on. And just notice on a scale of 0 to 10 how extreme it feels now, how intense it feels now, 0 to 10. What number would you give it now? Maybe you started at a 10 and now it feels like a 9, or it feels like an 8. It's gone down 2 points. Maybe it's gone down 3 points. It's a 7 now. Okay, so just notice that, and any physical sensations that you started with, to tune into those and notice if there's any change there. Movement, lessening, lightening, shrinking. You might notice as you're tapping that you get sudden, like a sudden deep breath in, or a sigh out, or you yawn. I yawn a lot when I'm tapping. That's a great sign. That's a sign that you're moving that pent up energy, that stress energy, you're releasing it. Blinking a lot happens. Sometimes burping happens. So there's any kind of physical thing that happens, that's a sign of release. You could pass gas. That's a great sign. Okay, so notice any shift in how you're feeling that sensation physically in your body, and notice an improvement there. If you're still holding on, if you're still tense, you're tight, if it's still to an extreme for you, it's not, or a place that feels like you're more neutral, or even, you're calm now. If you have a rating above a 5, then you want to do the rounds again. Usually you're going to have to do at least 3 rounds, because most times we're starting above a 5. The higher number you start with, the more rounds you're usually going to need to do, at least with this breathe and tap process. Okay, so that's the breathe and tap. Just go back again, do, repeat, lather, rinse, repeat. Starting at the karate chop and doing 2 to 3 deep breaths there, top of the head, 2 to 3 deep breaths there, inside of the eye, 2 to 3 deep breaths there. Okay, go through all the points back to the top of the head with that deep breath. Tune back into the feeling. Notice how it shifted physically. Give it a rating 0 to 10. Notice what number you're at. You want to be at least under a 5. Keep tapping rounds as with the breathe and tap. As long as you're making progress with each round, you're lessening it with each round. The physical feeling is shifting in a positive way with each round. Just keep doing the breathe and tap. Sometimes we get to a point where we need to move to one of the other techniques to release it more. So if we're doing a couple of rounds of the breathe and tap and it's not shifting anything in a noticeable way for you, then you can move to one of the other tactics. So the next one is the next simplest way to do the EFT, the basic technique, where you are using wording to tune into, to name, to identify, to acknowledge the feeling that you have, but creating a loving affirmation, a statement and feeling about having the feeling. So we started the karate chop with this, and we say what we call the setup statement 3 times. The setup statement is a fill in the blank. So it's adaptable to whatever it is that you're feeling. So remember, I asked you before, tune into one specific feeling of fear. What is one thing that you're afraid of? Like, I'm afraid of getting sick. I'm afraid of a loved one getting sick. I'm afraid of dying. Sometimes more the extreme, not the getting sick, but the dying, not recovering from it, or somebody that you love who maybe is immune suppressed, getting it and then dying. Maybe it's you're afraid of losing your job. You're afraid of losing your income. So a lot of different fears going on. So whatever it is that you are tuning into, say it's the fear of getting the virus. How strong is that fear of getting the virus, 0 to 10? And then you do the setup statement. Even though I fill in the blank with what the feeling is, fear. So even though I feel fear, or even though I feel afraid, even though I feel scared, whatever words you want to use, your words are always going to be the best. So I'm just a guide, but if a word feels better for you to use versus what I'm using, then use that. Even though I feel this fear about or because of blank. So what's the trigger? What's the fear about? What's the anger? Who's the anger towards? Etc. So even though I feel this fear about getting the coronavirus, and then you follow that with an affirmation statement such as, I forgive, love, and accept myself, or I forgive, love, and accept this feeling. Right now, there's some variations to doing what you're saying in this setup statement while you're tapping the karate chop point. I'm just teaching this one basic thing today. Don't overcomplicate it. Just start with a simple recipe. Even though I feel this fear about getting the coronavirus, I fully and completely forgive, love, and accept myself. Even though I have this fear about getting the coronavirus, I fully and completely forgive, love, and accept this feeling. It's another way you could say it versus myself. Even though I have this fear that I'm going to get the coronavirus, I fully and completely forgive, love, and accept myself or this feeling. Okay. And then you go to the top of the head. Now, the rest of the points after karate chop are just repeating what the statement is. Don't get worried that if you keep repeating the negative feeling that you're going to make it worse. People get afraid about that, especially if they've done any, work with positive affirmations, etc. And you don't want to focus on the negative. You just want to focus on the positive. But in this case, you need to identify, you need to address, you need to acknowledge the feelings that you have instead of pretending like they're not there, trying to stuff them down or cover them up, because they will come out in other ways, in less controlled ways. So we need to acknowledge it. And what we're trying to do with the tapping is to diminish the energy of that emotion, because emotions are energy, emotion, energy, and motion. We want to begin to dissipate the energy of the emotion, to have it begin to lighten, lessen, fade away, dissolve, little by little, more and more. So that's what we're doing. We're stimulating the energy of this emotion and vibrating it with the tapping and helping to break up the strength of it, loosen it up so it can begin to dissipate, just like we do with a stain. So after we do karate chop, the rest of the points are just saying a short reminder statement about the feeling, or if you can make it short enough, the feeling and the trigger. This fear about getting the coronavirus. And you just tap 7 to 10 times, or about the length of time that it takes you to say the reminder statement. This fear about getting the coronavirus. This fear about getting the coronavirus. I'm afraid of getting the coronavirus. I'm afraid of getting the coronavirus. This fear about getting the coronavirus. Again, whatever the wording is that feels right for you, to stay focused on what the feeling is that you're tapping on. This fear of getting the coronavirus. I'm afraid of getting the coronavirus. This fear about getting sick. This fear about getting this coronavirus. Okay, that's one full round. You take a deep breath. You let it go. And then just like with the breathe and tap, after you take that breath with the first round, you tune into the feeling again, give it a rating 0 to 10. Notice any way that it's shifted physically in your body. If it's still not a level where you feel like you can function, you can move on, you can think productively, where you're feeling calm, you're feeling more positive, whatever it is that is going to be a better feeling state where you're in a good place right now, or you're in a good enough place right now to do what you need to do and to act in a logical way, then you can end. But if you're not there yet, then just repeat. Okay, so if I'm still above a 5 with the rating, even though I still have this fear about getting the coronavirus, I fully and completely forgive, love, and accept this feeling. Even though I have this fear about getting the coronavirus, I fully and completely forgive, love, and accept myself. Even though I still have this fear about getting the coronavirus, I fully and completely forgive, love, and accept myself in this feeling. This remaining fear about getting the virus. This remaining fear about getting the virus. This remaining fear about getting the virus. This remaining fear about getting the coronavirus. This remaining fear about getting the virus. This remaining fear about getting the virus. This fear that I have about getting the virus. This remaining fear about getting the virus. This remaining fear about getting the virus. This remaining fear about getting the virus. All right. So I can feel my shoulders. I don't have fear about getting the virus, but there's other fears going on. So the good thing is that when you're tapping along, even if when you're tapping along with someone, you're saying the words that they're saying, and it's not necessarily something you have the fear about. Any fears that you have, any negative emotions that you have, are naturally being positively affected because you're doing the stimulation of the points, and your body knows what is strong and what it's what is going to be helpful for it to release. Okay, so this is why having the words isn't always necessary. It's the stimulation of the points first and foremost that help to elicit the response within the brain and the parasympathetic nervous system. Adding the wording helps to better tune in to what specifically we're feeling, especially if there's a lot of different thoughts and a lot of different feelings that are contributing to the negative energy that you're experiencing, the feeling of stress or anxiety that you're feeling. Then adding the words can help to zero in and peel one layer away. So once we've done that and the rating for that fear of getting the virus is gone, then what's one of the other fears that you tuned into, that you wrote down, you gave a rating to? Tune back into that one now. How strong is my feeling for that one? And 0 to 10. And now you can start to tap on that. But don't move on to another one until you've processed the first one to at under a 5 at the very least, but really work with it and continue to get it lower and lower with each round. So after I finish that second round, take the deep breath, let it go, tune back into the feeling, 0 to 10. What number is it now? Any shifts within the body? Any way that I'm still holding on to it? I want to tap some more. I want to release even more of it, even though I still have this feeling of fear about getting the coronavirus. You can even say the number. Even though I have this fear at a level of a 5 about getting the coronavirus, I fully and completely forgive, love, and accept this feeling. Right? 3 times with that at the karate chop, and then you move on with a reminder statement at each of the rest of the points. This remaining fear about getting the coronavirus. This level 5 fear of getting the coronavirus. This remaining fear about getting the coronavirus. This level 5 feeling of fear about getting the coronavirus. Okay, so any of these variations, but just keep repeating what the negative feeling is at each of the points. So you get back to the top of the head, you take the deep breath, you check in with the rating again. If you want to move it even more, keep repeating, okay? Once you've gotten down to a better level, even a 0, you can clear it completely, tune back in. Is there still any fear? Yeah, I still feel a sense of fear. Sometimes it moves to a different emotion. It's not fear anymore, but maybe now it's overwhelm about all the things you have to do, all the things you have to consider. And then you can focus on that, give that a rating, and start tapping on that. If there's still a sense of fear, what's left? What's the fear about now that's still remaining? 0 to 10, what is the fear on that? And then start to tap on that. Even though I have the fear about my loved ones. Or you could say somebody specific that you're worried about getting the virus. Even though I'm afraid of my father getting the virus, I fully and completely forgive, love, and accept this feeling. Okay, and then just go through that. So that's the breathe and tap, and that is the basic or original tapping technique that was developed by Gary Craig in the 70s and has been utilized since that time to help millions of people with a variety of negative emotions and habits and conditioned responses and physical situations like pain and others. And it is very versatile, works really well with trauma, anxiety, panic attacks, so many things. But just experiment a little bit. Don't go, to too many extremes of trying to work with it yourself. Just focus maybe on any kinds of fears that you have. Write them down. What are they? Rate them at a 0 to 10, and then one by one, just focus on them from the highest down until you feel calm. Now, things are going to happen. You're going to get triggered again. You watch something on the news, you see something on Facebook that somebody posted. That happened to me the other day, and my heart started racing. I started to worry and had to do some tapping, calm myself down, get my rational brain thinking again, and take some strategic preventative actions, or do a little bit of research to identify the validity of the information that I saw, etc. But we can't do that when we're in the total fear and worry, rumination kind of thought process or feelings within our body. Okay. So comment below the video if you have any questions and any comments. Like I said, I'm going to post some things in here that will be helpful for you to keep using the EFT, learning a little bit more about it if you're one of those inquisitive types and you like to know the inner workings of things and all of that. But again, you don't need to know all of that to just follow the steps that I taught today, to use it, see how it works for you. Don't disregard anything until you have given it your own firsthand experience of how it might just be valid and work for you. So look for more videos. I'll be continuing to post things like this and other resources every day throughout the next week and weeks to come. To serve people's needs. If you have something specific that you'd like maybe me to do a short tapping video on, post that as well, or email me. And if you feel like you need some more one-on-one help, then let me know that as well. Just you can direct message me through Facebook. My email is Lisa at themindtrainingcenter.com, and I can answer your emails there, or through direct message on Facebook, and let you know if there's something that I can work with you privately on. Take care, wash your hands, practice physical distancing, but continue to stay in touch virtually with the people that you love and your support systems. Bye for now.